Hi, welcome to Quad Pod. As you can see on screen, we've got David Treharne. David, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Al. And the weather has not been summer-like, I'm afraid. There we are. That's one of those things, isn't it?
And for I'll do an introduction for you in a minute when we do the show. But for the benefit of everybody, you actually, I think, still live overlooking the ground. Is that right?
I do. I'm less than 400 meters as the whatever it is bird you want to imagine flies. Yes, I can see 2/3 of the pitch from the top of the house, but neither of the goals.
Neither of the goals. That is absolutely no good at all whatsoever.
If you are in the house and there's a match on, you have to imagine what's happening in the goal area because I can't see either of them. All I can see is a lot of people running around in the middle of the pitch. But usually, if there's a big crowd, you can hear when we score. So I'm told.
Oh, brilliant. And of course, you're always at the game, so you wouldn't know, I would imagine. So, right,
no.
Let's introduce you a little bit, right? Now, and the history of us is that we've probably known each other 22 years, I would think.
I would have thought so, Al, yeah.
As in physically talked to, knew each other's names. We probably knew each other by face before then. But as we know, with the trust was probably when we started to know each other. So got you on because a few people have done books. So, for example, a quick shout out for Brian's book, who was on recently, Brian Kennedy. In fact, he's done 2 books, but he's done a book. We've then got Nick Spencer, who did a book, Never Say Die. He hasn't been on the show. And it talks a little bit about the subject matter of yours, but I personally think that you've done, sorry, Nick, a much better job. So, but that's still a good read. So, and I'd love to, if he's listening, to get him on the show. We've then got, I've got a proud copy of your book, right? And for the benefit of the audience, it's called 20 Years of Trust Control, Exeter City Football Club by David Treharne. And I think it retails...
Not a very snappy title, really, is it?
But it does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? So there's no problem with that. And how much does it retail? I think it retails, it's available on Amazon for £65. Is that right?
Yeah.
So so it's I think it's not. How can I?
That would be that would be right. But if people get in contact with me, I do have the means of actually reducing the price for them. But they need to get in touch with me, and we'll talk about how they can do that later on.
Yes, of course. And we must meet up, by the way, because I'd like to get a signed copy from you as well, which I'm sure you would do. So I've been amiss. I've forgotten to do a few things I normally do at the start of the show because we started talking. So very quickly, thank you to Top Boys, and thank you to Carrie Gillam, who will be it will be in an episode that's released later today as we do the recording today. So. Okay, done that. So, books written. I've also missed out Simon Carter. I've noticed he's done a great book, which I didn't have a copy here. It's in my garage somewhere, and it would take me half a day to get to it. And obviously, Mike Blackstone. So, we all know he's done some fabulous books. So, you've done a book. Introduce yourself to people, and I'm going to give you a bit of a framework of that, if I could. So, first game of watching City, what age were you? Did you play youth football? If so, where did you play?
First game was 1971 at Barrow. It took me 3 days to get there and 2 days to get back. And it wasn't a very auspicious start because at the end of the season, Barrow went out of business.
And in the nicest way. Sorry.
Did I play youth football? Yes, I did play youth football.
I think we have a delay, don't we? Go on, youth football.
No, youth football. Yeah, I played youth football on Roath Park in Cardiff, which is where I was born and brought up.
Were you? Okay. And what was your favourite position?
I played left half, I'm afraid. You have to remember that this is the sort of dark days of early football, when in fact everybody was ascribed a position that you could describe, and I was left half, which is sort of central. Well, no, left side of midfield, I suppose. And was I any good? No. You might as well admit it right away. I was, yeah, capable, but not a star in any way.
And going back to the Barrow question, what possessed you to go to your first away game in Barrow?
Yeah,
or first extra game? There's a story.
Yes, there is. I had recently moved to Exeter. I had wanted to go and see Exeter City play. A friend of mine said they're playing at Barrow on this particular Saturday, and I had people that I could go and see en route. But of course, I stayed overnight in Barrow, and at the time, it's still true, the train service from Barrow on a Sunday was pretty inadequate. So actually, I really didn't go anywhere on Sunday either. But then most of Barrow wasn't actually open anyway. So as I say, it took me another 2 days, another day after that to get home.
Wow.
So that was my first experience. It wasn't a particularly auspicious one, but that was my first game.
And did Exeter win?
Yeah. But if you remember, well, no, you probably don't remember, but the Barrow went out of business at the end of the season and their records were expunged. So I believe in the return game, we beat them 7-1, but I have no recollection of that. That was my first experience going to see Exeter City play anyway.
Brilliant. Not many people can beat that. And who's your favourite all-time player?
Yes. Interesting question. And I'm not going to mention anybody that probably the majority of people will have heard of. My favourite player was Rainier Moore, who I sponsored in the first season that the trust took control. He was at number 9. He was, he subsequently had issues. I think that's probably the best way of saying it. But he was a really, if you know.
And I think he scored at Boston away, if my memory serves me right. Hello, David.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're probably right, Al. I wasn't at Boston for various reasons, but no, Rainier was, let's just say, a character. He didn't have his contract renewed either.
Did he not? Okay, there's a story there. Right, I'm for the benefit of both of us. I think the Wi-Fi in Devon with the weather is causing a few challenges, but we're going to go for it if we may. Right. So, the book, your book. What was the motivation to do it?
Well, there have been books written about the football club, and I didn't feel that I was in a position to write about the football club. But the trust has made such a significant difference to the way that football in Exeter is both run, perceived, thought about, and accepted, that I thought it was a worthwhile exercise to actually write a book about the trust. Of course, at times it's not really possible to separate the trust and the club, and I try to acknowledge throughout the book where that is the case. But I think that the trust has made a significant contribution, and I wanted to make sure that people knew that, in fact, it wasn't all about success, because there were avenues that we went down right the way through the whole thing that actually weren't the right thing to have done. But you only learn that retrospectively, and that there were people who wanted to be a part of it and who were for a time a part of it and valuable parts of it. And there's a danger that, in fact, in going forward, because history is always written by the winner, that those people were forgotten. So I've tried to mention as many as possible, although I can think of several that I wanted to mention that I haven't, because space didn't permit it.
No, and do you know what? I get that and I understand that. And off air, when we first talked about this, I'm trying to think, it was about a week, 10 days ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd got the book and I literally skimmed, read it, and I particularly looked at the first couple of chapters, and I thought, well, yeah, that's right. And there was a lot of, and I like you think that there are 3 or 4 people that, and it's not critical of you, that are maybe not in your book, because as you say, they've been missed, but there's just too many people to mention, and that's not a criticism at all. I think your book's brilliant, by the way. So how long did it take you to write?
Well, I wrote part of it as an article for Football and Society, but the stuff that I didn't use, I incorporated in the book. I guess overall, from start to finish, it took about 18 months, because an awful lot of that time was spent in the Devon Records office. And if you look at the back of the book, where at the acknowledgements, the Devon and Records office were an immense help. They dug out stuff for me that had cobwebs on it, because nobody had looked at it for absolutely ages. And it gave me just an interesting insight into not only the way that the trust wasn't mentioned at all until such time as we actually took the club over. Yeah. Really, Press and Echo. I hate to criticise journalists, because I know what a miserable job they have, but the Express and Echo really ignored the trust right up until the time where, with 300 members and about 30,000 quid in the bank, we actually took the club over. It was only then that they actually did anything in support. But of course, contrary to that, the amount of support that we had from David Conn, who was writing for The Independent and then later for The Guardian, was absolutely immense.
Yeah, no, he's been a big influencer in football, hasn't he? And he's done some really good investigations. So, and by the way, I can relate to you taking 18 months on the book. As you know, I'm in the final parts of writing a book, which is it's a slightly different subject. There is a small portion linked to about the trust, but the vast majority of it is just all about watching Exeter. But it does take some time to do. I mean, I'm on about 170 pages, and I need to close it down, which I will do in due course. But going back to your book, split into 9 sections. I'm not going to go through all the detail, because I want people to read your book. What I was really impressed about was the way you talked about things like the failing, the starting, the crisis. And, like you say, there have been people out there that have done stuff, but maybe didn't do the right thing, but they still played a part. So what do you think in terms of the book you wanted to achieve from it in terms of getting it out there?
Well, of course, the first thing is to illustrate how badly run, however you look at it, how badly run the club was for a fairly long period of time. Going back even further than I went, there were occasions when, for example, they said that they would they might have to close the club during the summer to save money. And although
Really?
a lot of people will not like the fact that I'm critical of certain people right the way through that period, it's undoubtedly true, and I write it in the book, that there was money spent on what if essentially were vanity projects and things that mattered, like the infrastructure of the estate, later of the Cat and Fiddle, and so on and so forth, were neglected. And in lots of ways, I think that was a big help when the trust actually came forward, because, as you will recognise, I put in quite a lot about the fact that that summer of 2003, we brought together just an immense number of people to do things that nobody else asked anybody to do, and they enjoyed doing it. Kate Searle and so on write or talk to me. Bernadette Coates talked to me about how much they had enjoyed that, and it was really in lots of ways a dismal experience. Kate told me about cleaning out. If you speak to people who were involved then at that when we took it over, somehow the people who had run the club before had made no attempt at all to harness the kind of willingness that was there to actually get involved. That's really one of the motivations for writing the book.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. Sorry, they made no attempt to what? Say again.
The previous owners have made really no. They claimed that they were a community club, but their involvement in the community was absolutely anything but involvement in the community. And my PhD is about the nature of community, and I'm enthusiastic because I think the way that you get people to do things is by involving them. And I think a lot of politicians make the mistake of not actually involving people, but telling people what is good for them.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And one of the compliments I'm going to give you about the book is you made some really good observations. I think that some of the people you can't underestimate how their day jobs were affected. And we both know of people. Well, I don't think we should name all the names at this point because a lot of them are in the book. But there's a lot of people that put their whole lives on the line at the time, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, yes, and also, as Neil Lemillier points out, often for very little reward at all. For an example would be Terry Pavey. Another one would be Barry Sansom. And I'm again talking about the motivation for the book. I was very anxious that those people should be included because otherwise, they played a major part in it, and in lots of ways, have faded into the background, and I think it would be a mistake to forget them. Of course, there were other people that I ought to have mentioned, like Trevor Gilbury and like Chris Lohman, who were equally involved, and gave up a huge amount to actually do it. But overall, what I think is important to stress is the fact that it wasn't just individuals; it was such a collective effort.
It was, yeah, it was. And so, for example, the Martin Ellicotts, the Paul Garnhams, and this is where, like you say, it's very hard for one person to name all the people, to your point, because there were so many people out there, and I know you'll agree with me with those two people as well. Martin works on the bar in the centre spot now. I don't know where Paul Garnham is. Do you, for example?
Yes, I do. He works for a firm called Akiva, and is based in Exeter, but travels all over the country and also follows the cricket. He is a cricket nut. So he's based actually in Clistheiden, I think he's based. The other point that I wanted to make, Al, that I think is important, is that there's an underlying threat right the way through the book, of misogyny, because if you think about people like,
go on.
Well, I think about people like Elaine Davis, Denise Watts, Fiona, and excuse me, they have an awful lot to put up with in terms of the way that the male orientation. It's still
yeah. Bear with us,
right.
David. I think he's going to take a drink, so he's just coffee. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Take your time.
So, where I'm not quite sure. Misogyny, yes. I hope that gradually we're beginning to get rid of misogynistic attitude that certainly pervaded the club in the 80s and 90s, and to some extent was carried on. And I think that's an important thing that the trust needs to think about going forward.
I agree, and I think you make a great point there, because I actually wrote that down, because you talk in the very you made a point I picked up in the book that as it stands, there's no females on the board. Right now, Quad Pod, which
on the trust board, Alistair.
Sorry, on the trust board. Yes, you're quite right.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. And I actually made a point of interviewing Denise, for example, and I've got Carrie Gillam, that's just going out today, and that's been quite deliberate. I've got an 18-year-old daughter. She's quite into football, right? You've seen her at matches, and she needs to feel safe and included. So, the women's football team, I'm actually talking to Manfi Sharp. And we're trying to get her on. We're just trying to sort out logistics, and we're going to make a deliberate point of it. And it's super important. And it's a bit of a worry, given that we're such a community club, isn't it? But I think it will change. Do you think?
I hope so, because I think I think it's quite an interesting point. Just going back to talking to the two ladies about their experiences at the work parties. One of the things that surprised them was at the work parties around 2003 that there wasn't the preponderance of males that there was perhaps at the matches, and that there were a lot more women who were involved than actually went to the matches, which I think is quite an interesting thing. And I think one of the encouraging things over the last few years is the number of females who have started attending home games. And presumably do so because they feel unthreatened. I think probably unthreatened is the right way. Although,
yes,
yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't think my daughter would feel she feels safe. She's quite, for example, she's quite worldly wise and she's seen stuff, but like you say, she does feel safe. So I think it's good that we're doing that. And by the way, long may it be encouraged, because as we both know, dexterity and abilities, it's everybody should be involved. So other thing you one of the other things you mentioned was the a lot of paperwork. I think you said in at one point there's a lot of bureaucracy, isn't there?
Yeah, and again, going back to 2003, I think one of the biggest shocks that we had was that it looked for a time as though the football conference weren't actually going to accept us into their league, and the amount of paperwork that was involved, particularly getting the ground up to standard, the cat and fiddle up to standard, and so on and so forth, that was important. But the other thing was that keeping track of what was going on at the time was really difficult because, as you know, with the arrest of Russell and Lewis, a lot of the paperwork that would have been available for 2002, 2003 just wasn't available. And we had things like a very unreliable share list. We didn't quite know who was a shareholder and who wasn't, and who had shares passed on to them through their family. And of course, the whole thing about shareholding hasn't really been resolved subsequently.
And I know it's been a frustration because, for example, I've looked at it, you've looked at it. The Police Federation, an example, were shareholders. That's lovely, and it's a very nice historic thing, but it's very interesting. And I'm not calling out the Police Federation. I'm just using it as an example. There were lots of interesting parties, shall we say, with a share, wasn't there?
Yeah. Just going back to the pre-2003 thing, the amount of hidden debt was quite shocking to me, both at the time and while I was writing the book, reminding myself how much money was owed and to whom.
Wow. And do you know what? If we go forward 20 years now, I know a lot of people that see, for example, I'm one of those advocates, and I know that you know where I come from, and I can be quite painful sometimes looking at the governance and looking at the paperwork. And that's one of the reasons why. And it's not because we think that people are doing something bad now. I think it's more just to make sure that we're on the right track and we keep everybody sensible, because football's an interesting industry, isn't it? There's a lot in football, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. And I suppose the other thing is that, you know, differentiating between what's going on, for example, in the Premiership and the Championship, and then comparing it to what's going on at clubs like Exeter City is a salutary warning and experience. I mean, it's interesting. I'm always amazed when you see what players exchange transfer fees for in the Premiership, and often think we could run Exeter City for 20 years on that particular amount of money.
Transfer fee.
And I do think that finances, well, as far as lower league clubs in particular are concerned, has become completely unbalanced as compared to what goes on in the top two leagues. But it'll be interesting to see.
And it's interesting to say that, because and that's one of the key motivations of QuadPod. And I'm going to do a little shout out, because you know that we have a share in FC Chattanooga. There's FC United and Manchester that are punching well. They're really starting to go well. AFC Wimbledon are doing it. They've got a lovely stadium now. They were chucked out of Plough Lane. You know the story there. You've got Hull, I think Bath are that were playing in a friendly coming up. Obviously Greece, Panathinaikos, 1891 going European. There's other countries are really struggling, particularly where the economies are struggling, like Greece. Then you've got Motherwell in Scotland, and then Portsmouth, who were a fans-owned club and then stopped being a fans-owned club. And we're playing them in a couple of weeks, right? They're still in the same league as us. So I think the Exeter City Trust has done all right, hasn't it?
Yeah, but again, I'm always worried about complacency. And I think that one of the things that we have to keep on doing, we have to keep on looking at what the Trust is doing. And I'm glad that there are people who are prepared to do that. If you look at the fans' forums, they are often questions, quite serious questions, about what is going on in terms of running both the club and the Trust. And I think that is desperately important because, if being owned by the fans is going to have any meaning at all, then the fans have to be involved in knowing what's going on and what might or might not be going right and wrong. So I think it's very important to keep on questioning what is going on. Uncomfortable, you will know about that, Alistair. You know how uncomfortable it is asking questions of people who don't actually want to give answers.
And you've got relationships with sometimes that go back 15, 20 years. And, I know that we've had our moments and we're a long way past that. I know that. At least I hope we are. I don't think we are. But we've got to keep doing that, right? Because I'm just going to give one example of today, and that's Southend United, right? We do not, as a club, ever want to be like Southend United are right this moment. So I'm delighted you wrote the book, and I want to thank you for doing it because I thought about writing a book on it, but I knew I wasn't the right person to do it, and you were the right person to do it. So well done, you. I'm going to move on now to the new season, because you've been there, you know what's going on, right? What do you think? What new signings? Where do you think we are? Where the club is? Second season League One syndrome risk? What do you reckon?
I'm quietly optimistic. I'm hoping that the manager is going to bring in a couple of defenders, a couple of, if you like, seasoned defenders, or at least, if not seasoned defenders, people who are prepared to actually put their foot in and do it. I'm happy with what he's signed so far. Well, in theory, I am anyway. But I think the defence looked particularly shaky at times during the latter part of last season, and I hope that in fact he will strengthen that defence by the start of the season anyway. I think the other encouraging thing that I would say is that we do appear to have yet another crop of youngsters coming through who are, I think, going to be of value both immediately but also going forward, provided we can get the same sort of deals as we've been getting for the players that we have moved on. Yeah. Just as an aside, I think the other interesting thing that came out this week is that Ethan Ampadu is the longest serving player at Chelsea without actually having played a large number of games for Chelsea. And then when you look at the number of people that they had out on loan last season, it does make you wonder, what is going on there. But then we've got a Chelsea player on loan this season, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
But that's not all bad because I think I heard somewhere that we could have got 20% of €1.5 million while he was on loan at Spezia. So, these loan players that go out and get loaned, and we have deals with. Sometimes it works out quite well. I'm going to challenge you a little bit. You said about the defenders, right? We've got 3 or 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
What about? I think that the problem is slightly further forward. Just talking football for a minute. I'd like to see a couple of really strong CDMs to help them. Do you think that would help?
I think a lot actually this season is going to depend on whether Czech Diabate can actually make it through a season, because I think he's a particularly good player actually.
Yes.
And I think, as I say, I'm much more worried about what is going on defensively, and also, of course, the situation with the goalkeepers. But it's the ongoing thing at Exeter City, isn't it? Again, going back to the websites, there is always gloom and doom, because people don't have anything better to think about during the summer. They are thinking about Exeter City, and you get all this. We are going to start the season with a squad of 11 players, and there we are.
Yeah.
We are short of this player. We are short of that player, and then by the start of the season, it's beginning to sort itself out. Just briefly going back and picking up on that, one of the great things about the Trust era at Exeter City is that we've had 5 managers in 20 years, and as I point out in the book, last season, by the time I finished writing the book, there are 48 sackings in the Football League of managers. And I think, it's important. I mean, I really thought that the last manager was doing a great job. I'm pleased that he's moved on to Rotherham. And I just think we have to give the present incumbent time to build the side he actually wants to build. Again, going back to the Trust, the fact of the matter is that the Trust actually has enabled that to happen. And the managerial ins and outs in 2003 were a sufficient example of what can go wrong if you keep on changing managers.
Yeah, no, I agree. What 1 or 2 things do you think the Trust need to do to really help Gary Coleman this week?
I just think we need to encourage people to actually get behind the team. Going back to, I may be wrong, but one of the encouraging things over the last few seasons has been the fact that the fans have really got behind the team. I've been supporting Exeter City long enough to remember that, in fact, you could stand on the big bank and there would be people moaning from the off. And I think, if anything, the ethos has changed completely in the 20 years the Trust has been in control. They now actually get behind the players and want to support them and want to support the manager.
Yeah, they do. And do you know what? You make a really good point about away ends and matches, because I remember standing at Ipswich and thinking we've just lost 4 or 5 games on the trot. We're 5 hours from Exeter, right? We've got nothing to play for, right? And there's just under 1,000 Exeter fans there. And I would garner that in the late mid-80s, there would have probably been how many Exeter fans? 100? 150?
If that. And a large number of them would have been in the supporters club minibus as well. That was an experience in itself.
Wow, yeah, there's some stories. We'll have to get you on to talk about those things. Right, let's pull this together. Prediction for finishing for the season. Going to put you on the spot.
10th.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know what? It's really difficult because I've put you on the spot. I'm not going to hold you to that because you don't know all the signings that are coming in over the next few weeks. So at the moment, I'm going to say mid-table. and I'd like to see a little bit more. So, and you're saying exactly the same with the defenders by the sound of it. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, David, I want to say really thank you for coming on. And in terms of the book, if you want to know a little bit more about Exeter City, get out there and go and buy it. You've heard David say, if you want to get a book, go and ask him, right? And I would do that, and I will keep my copy upstairs. So, David, really thank you for coming on. I look forward to working with you and asking loads of difficult questions as we continue to do in life about Exeter. But we all believe in the same thing. See in red and white. Have you got an Exeter shirt?
I have several Exeter shirts. My favourite,
Have you got the new one?
Huh? Have I got a new one? No, I haven't. My two favourites are, first of all, the purple away shirts from the 2002-2003 season.
With the beaver, yeah?
Yeah, and the black and gold that we wore during that cup run, which was
with our names on.
With our names on.
Yeah. And I wore this T-shirt particularly for you and today.
Yeah.
Football without fans is absolutely nothing, right? So
absolutely.
And the man on screen today for any younger viewers played a big part. And I know that you've mentioned me, but there was a lot of people that played a part. And I personally, David, think that we should try and get them all together and maybe have a dinner at the club this year or an evening. And if we could work that out between us, I'd really, working with the club, of course, I would like that to happen. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm guessing you're still in contact with the vast majority of people in the book.
I am.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Let's make it so. Thanks for coming on. You've been brilliant.
Pleasure, Alistair.
See you soon. Yeah. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Blackpool.
Okay. Yeah. Cheers.